The signals I gave out were more conflicted. "Throw it my way," they said. "Give me another vantage point on this catastrophe so I can grasp its enormity. Owen's death is too large to remain a private affair. I want this knowledge and I want this closeness. But do not tell me too much. Do not turn this death into a spectacle or a collective trial that taught us something and brought us closer together, even if that is true. Do not suggest that your grief resembles mine." These were unreasonable expectations, I knew that. One friend recalled that, during her first phone call, Alison had asked how she would go on living. Another told us she was in her car when her husband, who was standing outside, answered his cell phone. She watched him speak, and then sob, though she did not know why. These are the kinds of recollections Alison sought to avoid. But I listened because our lives tipped over at that exact moment, and I wanted to understand the world into which we had tumbled. One day, a friend began describing the nervous anticipation that had filled our home in Woodstock, New York, as we made our way back from Utah. But she stopped mid-sentence because of Alison's obvious lack of interest. I was disappointed. Though I never asked, I would have liked to hear what happened when friends and relatives converged upon our home the day after the accident. They had to respond to a situation they barely fathomed, and at the same time handle practical matters. Someone had to drive to the Albany airport to find the courage to face us and say those initial words. Something else. What should the house look like when we arrived? I imagined that this entailed many decisions. Where people would position themselves, whether food would be laid out, how bright to set the lights. There was a scene to compose. I was only dimly attuned to all of this, but did realize that people were stepping in and making decisions. They were making decisions for us. This was one of the mental notes I kept during the early days, tabulating as best I could the widening gulf between the old reality and the new. 2 friends made the hour-long drive to Albany. It was dark, I think, when we left the airport. I sat in the back seat, feeling already like a passenger in my own life. I do not think that we discussed anything substantive during the ride, though I could be wrong. A haze surrounds these days, with random moments of clarity etched into my memory. Among these moments, the sight of my mother, the first person whom I saw as we pulled into our garage. She shuffled across the dusty concrete floor with tiny penguin-like steps, ashen-faced, arms half open. Though she moved slowly, I knew that she would reach me, grip me, collapse upon me. Behind her stood my father, smaller than in the past, my in-laws, my brother-in-law, friends from the area and others who had already flown in, all part of a funereal receiving line that meandered from the garage to the entryway, the kitchen, and finally the living room, a line of still and silent beings who resembled embalmed corpses. What happened afterward? Did Alison and I sit with one person or one small group at a time? Did we talk about the Green River? Did we plead fatigue and retire to our room? And Julian, where did he go? All I know is that at some point that evening or the next day, lights went up, frozen bodies thawed, and wax-like faces regained elasticity. People began to move, first in slow motion and then faster, until they were twirling from one room to another, up and down the stairs, onto the deck, into the garden. The house lit up with a circular energy that was manic and magical, an energy that surrounded us, but could not touch me. Alison and I began dating within months of moving to New York in the late 1980s, both of us fresh college graduates. We left for Chicago a few years later. I began doctoral studies in French history. Alison planned events for nonprofits, and returned in 2000, when New York University hired me. Having missed the early Giuliani era, we came back to a city that was cleaner and more affluent than the one we had known.